Hey everybody, Ed. Before we get started, I've got two quick announcements. Number one, I want to thank a lot of brand new Patreon supporters. Randy Batch, Matt Hogan, Trevor Stolte, Jason, Tom Paragi, David Dinsmore, Nicholas Potter, Alan Townsend, Sarah Crittenton, Nancy Mendelson, Anthony Ufkes, and Jeff. All these folks signed up at mountainandprairie.com/Patreon, and I think one of the reasons for all the new Patreon signups is that I'm doing a Patreon exclusive podcast once a month. So if you want to learn more about that or learn more about anything related to supporting the podcast, just go to mountainandprairie.com/support. And second, I want to make sure you're all aware of this summer's Free Flow Institute workshop and river trip that I'm going to be hosting on the Rogue River in Oregon. If you've been listening to the podcast for a while, then you probably remember that last summer in 2023, I hosted my first ever Free Flow Institute course on the Green River in Utah, and it was a huge success. Great people, beautiful landscape, just a really awesome time. 5 days of no cell service on one of the West's most beautiful rivers. So we're going to be doing it again, this time in Oregon. And so I would love to have some of you join. There's pretty limited space, so I'd encourage you, if you're interested, to go to my website, go to the events tab, or go to the Free Flow Institute website and look it up and get your application in, because it's already filling up and it's only going to go quicker, I think. So I'd love to have any of you join me on that this summer. Last year was unbelievable, and so I expect this one will be just as great, if not better. Thanks so much. This is the Mountain and Prairie Podcast. I'm Ed Robertson. My guest today is Sterling Drake. Sterling is an award-winning musician whose soulful tunes reflect his deep love of the landscapes, people, and culture of the American West. The media outlet Lonesome Highway probably best describes Sterling's music by calling it a, quote, perfect fusion of Western swing, honky-tonk heartache, and dance hall treasures. But you can't really confine Sterling's music to a single, overarching category. His influences range from country to folk to blues and much more, and he's toured everywhere from rural Montana to the swamps of South Florida to the music epicenter of Nashville, Tennessee. And it's those wide-ranging experiences and influences that have made him such a fascinating and thoughtful character and such a fun person to talk with. Sterling's family has roots in the southeastern U.S., and he was born and raised in Florida. Music was always a big part of his life, but his early interest revolved around the hardcore music scene and his love of drumming. Soon after graduating from high school, he decided to head out west, where he began a long stretch of working on various ranches in several different states. Over time, his musical focus shifted from the hardcore world into the roots genre, and he began to capture the attention of audiences at bars, rodeos, and everywhere in between. Today, Sterling is a full-time touring musician, and as I record this, he's preparing for his first European tour. In my mind, Sterling is a perfect example of how a person can successfully meld passion, curiosity, hard work, and respect to create an entirely unique brand of art that resonates with a large and thoughtful audience. I met Sterling last summer at the 2023 Old Salt Festival in Helmville, Montana, and I was instantly struck by his thoughtfulness, sense of humor, and his desire to contribute to the culture of the American West. So I was glad to finally connect with him for a podcast episode and have an in-depth conversation about his artistic journey. We started out talking about his upbringing in Florida and why he eventually decided to head west. We talk about his time working on ranches, lessons learned from living and working in Nashville, and why he continues to be drawn to Montana. We talk about his most recent EP titled Jericho Sessions and why he decided to donate all the proceeds of that project to the nonprofit Western Landowners Alliance. We also discuss Willie Nelson, books, martial arts, straight edge culture, travel, and much, much more. If you want to see Sterling perform in person and have a chance to hang out with him, I'd encourage you to come to this summer's Old Salt Festival, which is taking place June 21st through 23rd in Helmville, Montana. Both Sterling and I will be there, and we're both looking forward to what is guaranteed to be an amazing weekend. Thanks so much for listening. Hope you enjoy. All right, Sterling, This is a long overdue conversation because I probably would have mentioned this in the intro I'm going to do for this conversation, but you and I met at the Old Salt Festival last June up in Montana, and I met a bunch of people there and everybody was super cool, but the conversation I had with you is one of the most clear ones in my mind because we just met. I remember your arm was kind of messed up and we just started talking, and within like 15 seconds, I was like, this guy is super cool, super nice, and super, super interesting. And I wanted to just record a podcast with you on the spot. But here we are months later, finally making it happen. And so I'm just super excited to get to chat with you. And I'm glad that you're willing to take the time to talk with me. I think an interesting question for you would be, like, what's your first memory of music? And it could be like music that your family played, or listening to a record when you were a kid, or performing your own music when you were a kid. But like, you've had this long, stretch of loving music. What do you have a first memory of it?
I don't know if I can really recall a very first moment, but I do remember my introduction to music through my grandfather and through my father. I don't know if I have like a vivid first memory, but it was just always around. And in my family, nobody was a musician per se, but music was something we were aware of. My mother used to quiz me on anything that came on the radio, to the classic rock station or whatever it may have been. And I don't think they discriminated against any form of music. At least my parents didn't. And my grandfather was definitely a fan of country music. Willie Nelson, Waylon Jennings, Roger Miller. And a lot of that, I think I've come full circle around on. But I had kind of an open book as far as what music I could explore. And I think that was healthy for me because it gave me an actual appreciation for the music that I chose. They didn't really steer the boat. I think they're glad that I landed in country music though, but yeah.
And I think I read somewhere, did your grandfather, did he have roots in North Carolina? And I asked because that's where I'm from originally.
Yes, sir. Yeah. So I was born in South Florida. He had 3 sections of ranch country down there in what's the Big Cypress Preservation now. But yeah, he was originally from outside of Hendersonville. I believe. Cool. Yeah, his father had a horse farm, but that was many moons before myself. But yeah, so my family is very, I guess, Southern by way of both my mother and father's family, and then I made my way all across the country from then on.
Yeah, we'll talk about growing up in Florida, because I remember that was a kind of a surprise to me when we met. But it sounds like you grew up close to agriculture, just kind of in the humidity compared to being out west. But like, I'd love to hear more about just kind of what it was like growing up, because I remember at some point you told me like, yeah, I used to love riding skateboards, and yeah. Like, I'd love to know what kind of music was influential as a kid. So kind of paint a picture of what it was like growing up for you.
Yeah, so I was somewhat introduced to agriculture through my family, but my story was by no means like, die in the wool cowboy or anything like that. Obviously being from the East Coast, and my father was understood the life through his father, but I don't think he had maybe the same reverence for it as his dad did, or at least had different goals. So he took us away from that life, and he pursued college and got an engineering degree and fell into renewable energies, which were kind of a developing thing throughout my life, especially when his career was building. So we moved around a lot. And I think that gave me a different approach, I guess, to the world. I had an urban experience. I had a more rural experience at the same time. But yeah, by high school, by no means was I like on the path that I am today. I was a skateboard kid, and I loved hardcore music. I played drums and hardcore bands, and all across the East Coast too. And we moved around, and yeah, not at all what you would think of, I guess. And I think at one point I made that move after high school and came out west and started on guest ranches and made my way through, the West, from Utah to Wyoming and Montana, and working different jobs and just kind of like making my own path. But I think it was like a full circle moment. Our family did lose the ranch and a lot of the land that we had, the holdings we had in South Florida, under eminent domain. And so that took a few generations for it to it started in the 70s, but by the time I was about waist high is when a lot of that kind of the business weaned off from my grandfather. So I had this like healthy amount of romanticism for agriculture and for that way of life through my grandfather. And I think by the time I was coming of age, it was a kind of a full circle moment for myself. So that might have spawned it. He really loved Colorado. He loved the Rockies, and I kind of followed that dream.
Had you been out west much, like in high school or middle school? Like, did your family ever come out this way for trips? Because
No.
that's a big leap, or at least the way I operated when I was in high school. Like, I don't think I would have ever had the guts just to pick up and move. So like what got that in your head enough to the point where you're like, yeah, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna get out of high school and I'm taking off.
Yeah, it just sounded exciting. I don't know. I liked music. I played music all throughout high school and drums, and I got familiar with like traveling through that. And we'd hop in a van or something and head down the road and go to another town or city and play music. And that was exciting. And by the time I had real agency over myself and that choice, I was like, that was the adventure I wanted. And I had a healthy understanding of ranching at that point. We lived on a farm in the East Coast at that point, and I was taking care of horses and everything. So I had like enough of a understanding of horsemanship and agriculture, and it just seemed like the best place for it. So yeah, I made that jump. And,
were your parents supportive of that?
Yeah, my parents are great. They're supportive of just about anything I do. I think as long as I do a good job at something, they don't care what it is. So
was there any pressure to go to college?
Man, that's a good question. No, there wasn't. My folks are I can attribute a lot to them. They had kind of a laissez-faire upbringing with me. It kind of allowed me to do my own thing. And no, I think my family lived through the 2008 crash. That was like peak of my childhood. And I think my father, who was like one step removed from an agricultural setting and spent a lot of time trying to pursue a degree and maybe like a more white collar lifestyle. He had seen a lot of the efforts he had made towards that, quote unquote American dream. And I think a lot of it was demystified for folks like himself, like him in 2008, And so I think he thought like, man, whatever you're going to do, just go do it. And you have to like what you're going to do, because no matter what, it could be taken out from underneath you, and it could be of no fault of your own. And so if you're going to fail at something you at least want to do. So I think I understood that at a young age, and my parents did too.
How old were you in 2008?
Oh man, you're gonna make me do some math here. I was in middle school. Let's just say that.
That's crazy, man. Because I was that 2008, 2009 for me was like a big turning point as well. But I was, God, you're making me feel like an old man. I was in grad school then, and it was, I kind of went to grad school with this idea, the economy was booming and all this kind of stuff. And then that whole experience combined with, I had a pretty significant health scare during the same time as the economy was collapsing. Oh, and it just kind of knocked the sheen off of everything and made me realize, like, I don't know, things are not as they appear a lot. And it made me really reevaluate tons of things. Like, I feel like July of 2008 was the point when things really, really shifted for me. Because in June of 2008, I wanted to be a real estate developer, buying big ranches and turning them into golf courses.
Wow.
And then July, I mean, the exact opposite of what I'm doing now. And then July of 2008 is when it all kind of fell apart and started changing. So that's interesting to hear about. And it's also interesting how much of an old man I am compared to you.
Well, at least we both were in school, at that point.
You were learning more useful shit than me. I can do a good Excel spreadsheet. So where was the first place you went? Like you said, guest ranches. So you graduate high school. You get in your car, head out. Where do you go?
I went to Utah, southern Utah, Virgin, Utah, which is the Zion area. Worked out there for some folks and did the Wrangler thing. And I get kind of asked this question a lot from people that maybe are from the outside and realize that I didn't really grow up in ranching out west. Like, how do you get involved? Like, is there a way or an entry for that type of person? And I guess like the thing I could say is like, just just, you're going to have to take it on the teeth in the earlier years. You know, you're going to have to be the green person who doesn't have much experience. You're not going to take the best jobs. You're not going to, you know, have the dream situation right off the bat, you know. And that was very much that this stage of my life was just like hopping from different wrangler jobs and maybe ranch hand jobs and stuff, just to like get involved, get experience, get good work ethic, and have people that would refer you, and you kind of move your way up the ladder that way. And that's what I did. And that's what brought me up to Montana eventually. Was worked for a guest ranch in the Blackfoot Valley. And I think once I had been through a few other places, and I saw that place, and I was like, this is awesome. And there was a greater ranching community around there. And I just tried to stick around there as much as I could. And I really enjoyed their appreciation for conservation out there, and just how like, just the like culture there felt, it was diverse, but also very rural in a way. Like there was a healthy amount of ranching, and there soil biologists and all sorts of folks just from all different walks of life. And they were expressing their love for the West and in that part of Western Montana. And I just felt that it was like the type of culture I wanted to be a part of. So I've traveled a lot since then, but that's kind of been the place I've always, like in my mind, wanted to go back to. So it's kind of been home base.
Well, it strikes me with both your work on ranches and then in your music career, which we're obviously going to talk about, like you're not at all afraid of, you don't shy away from the grind and from paying your dues and from being very, very respectful of everybody who came before you or is there. Like, you know, in any conversation I've had with you or anything you read, you're very clear. You're not trying to act like you're somebody you're not. It seems like you approach everything with humility and like an appreciation for the opportunity. Like, were you a really, really hard worker as a kid, like in high school? I mean, did you make really good grades, or like, what were you like? Cause I'm always curious how people get that attitude. Cause there are people like you that I really love spending time with. And then there are people that are full of shit and like, and trying to put on a show and not be an authentic person. And so I'm like, where do you think that came from? This willingness to not shy away from hard work, to be humble, to be appreciative. Like, have you always been like that?
I don't know. First of all, I take that as a compliment, and I appreciate it, Ed. I think diversity of experience probably would be the one thing I could attribute any sort of work ethic that I have to. I think that my upbringing, being in a lot of different places, seeing a lot of different angles of things, and kind of understanding of universality to work or to really trying to achieve any form of goal, has like probably been a big contributor to that, if anything. And also like being humbled along the way. Like, you know, I'm 28 now. I'm like old enough to have put my foot in my mouth before. And like we all were green at something at one point, you know, and I still consider myself very, very green. And I realized, like, yeah, I mean, I've had good mentors. That's probably been a big part of it too, in all different walks of life. I think that's such a huge thing for folks these days, is to find a good mentor. I think it's such an understated thing, and I'm just lucky to have had some of those and to have sought them out. Yeah, so maybe that answers your question.
Yeah. It definitely does. I don't know. The older I get, the more I appreciate humility. And then I think I have an irrational fear of, like, say I thought I was good at, I don't know, say like I thought I was good at podcasting, and I was out like bragging to a group of people about how great I was at podcasting. And then in the crowd happened to be that I didn't see him was Joe Rogan. You know, like that's and I learned that in Boulder. I used to live in Boulder, Colorado, and I used to do a lot of endurance, like running races, and you can't really go anywhere without running into like a champion, 100-mile ultra runner. And so I learned real quick, you need to keep your mouth shut and never get too proud of yourself, because there's always people that are better. And I like that. So tell me how, like, as you're moving from these ranches, moving along, from Utah and then up to the Blackfoot Valley and all around, what was going on with music? How much of a part of your life was that? Like when you say from like age 18 to 22, something like that, your first 4 years out.
So music was kind of going on at the same time at certain points too, because I would work like seasonal positions sometimes, and it'd be easy enough to drive out, work a seasonal job, come back or whatever. But even since high school and like right after high school, at the same time, I was still playing and filling in with bands back east, playing in hardcore bands. But I just thought of it as an expression, and I really enjoyed that form of music. I can attribute a lot of maybe my like philosophy to hardcore music, and I don't know if you're all too familiar with that or the term straight edge, but I fell into the whole straight edge scene when I was in high school, and I am very thankful for it. I think I was like, you asked if I had good grades and stuff in school, and the answer was definitely no. I was an aggressive kind of like all over the place kid in high school.
But straight edge though.
Yeah, so that was a way to there's two things that probably channeled that my energy in a certain way was straight edge music in that scene, finding like older folks that were in the, when I was 16, I guess, meeting guys that were in their later 20s and early 30s even, that were like well connected and all that music that got me out of trouble. They got me out of situations that I probably shouldn't have been, got me away from people that were using and selling drugs, and more of like an inner city kind of experience. And so I think it was like a really, really great way to channel my energy towards like this aggressive form of music that's all about no drinking, no drugs, no alcohol. And that was great. And I also got into martial arts in high school. And that's what really like, I was definitely set down a path where I probably could have been going the wrong way. Fell into MMA and Taekwondo and just boxing, wrestling. I loved all that. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. It was great. I had a love for like physical language, if that makes sense. Like I was awful at basketball, football, all of that, but I understood like that conversation that wrestling had, or any sort of MMA. And I liked the physical engagement with like mosh pits at hardcore shows when I was younger. So I think that kind of like channeled that aggression for me. And it probably contributed to my discipline too later on in life. So sorry to kind of sidetrack that question.
I love that. But, no, I love that. I mean, it's interesting because I feel like I told you this on the phone we were talking the other day, like you're so far ahead of me as far as having your priorities straight and everything. But like I've kind of come to the same thing you were at in high school at age in my 40s. Cause like I don't drink. There's nothing other than coffee that goes into my system. And then just like a few months back, I just started jujitsu.
Oh, awesome.
And I'm going like, I mean, all hardcore. I mean, my body can only take so much, but I really want my girls to be involved in martial arts of some stripe, because it is so powerful. And I never understood that until now at age 46, which is crazy. That's cool, man.
Yeah. Yeah. I really enjoyed it. And I competed in Taekwondo and traveled with it throughout high school and played music. But I remember vividly, like my coach at the time, I told him I wanted to be a musician, and I don't think it really sat well with them. And they're like, you're either going to do this or go get an engineering degree or that's your options. And I was like, no, I don't think I didn't really pursue like a academic or a role for martial arts outside of that. I didn't think being a professional martial artist was anything I was interested in, but I think the door was open. I did work at a great studio and everything. But yeah, I ended up playing music as immediately after high school, and then following different ranch jobs. And I kind of like dipped my toes in both worlds. I loved traveling. I think that was like at the core of both of those things, was like that sense of adventure, traveling, and whether it was in a van with a bunch of like hardcore kids or if it was, out on the road or somewhere out in Utah, it didn't really matter. So that was kind of my early 20s for me.
Well, and I would guess that the martial arts, to my earlier question about where the work ethic and the humility come from, I mean, I've felt the biggest injection of humility that I can remember in a long time from jiu-jitsu. And so I would guess by having that in your system from an early age, like that probably contributed a lot to your outlook as a grown man. I mean,
Totally.
it's hard not to be humble when you're getting your ass kicked like that.
Yeah, it's totally. I was actually going to bring that up when you mentioned doing jujitsu. That's a very humbling thing. I remember I had won, regional, championships and stuff in taekwondo and everything in high school. And when I went to like my first real jujitsu kind of class, I remember just getting the snot kicked out of me by a like 40-year-old cubicle worker. And I was like, wait a minute, this is different. You got to have some strategy here. It's not just, so that was very humbling for me, for sure.
So when did the shift into country start taking place? Like, was that how did that come about?
Yeah, it's funny. I've always been writing music. I should probably say that since I was in middle school. Always been writing. My mother was a painter and an artist, and I think she really helped me explore art and creativity, and I had a healthy understanding of it. And I think that's where most of my intellect lies. I think some people are a lot more proficient at mathematics or science, but art has kind of been definitely my arena. But it wasn't a physical medium. It wasn't painting per se, and she helped me kind of discover that it was music, and then kind of like loosened the reins on me when I found my dad's guitar in the attic and kind of started writing songs. So I was always writing music in like a folk country kind of format. My first songs ever learned were like Hank Williams and stuff like that. So I had that understanding, and I never really attributed my like early years playing drums and like electric guitar and like hardcore and rock bands like to being a musician, oddly enough. It was just more of the experience. And I was always writing music for myself. I never really considered that as like an avenue that I really ultimately would take until later in life. But I was able to, I guess, use a lot of the skills that I learned through being in a DIY hardcore band and apply them to being a musician later in life. So yeah, I was always writing music, always kind of had that in the background, but I think my bandwidth was fully taken up when I was 19, 20, 21. And by that point, I'd kind of pivoted more into ranching and moved out west and full time. And it wasn't probably until much later when when you're alone and you have time to think, you can write more music, and it took up more of my time. And I really enjoyed and leaned more into songwriting later in life.
Well, I mean, I think it sounds like obviously music is so important to you, and whether anybody ever heard you play or not, whether you're performing, whether it was, you ever made $1 off of it, it seems like music is going to always be the thing you do and you love it. But at some point along this journey, I'm like, once you're out west and you're not really part of a band anymore, I would imagine that you started getting some positive feedback that you're like, whoa, there's something here more than me just writing my own songs. Like I'm getting some positive feedback that makes me want to maybe ramp this up or perform more or whatever. Like when did that start happening when you were doing more of the country kind of Americana type music?
Yeah, I started playing out and playing rodeos and state, fairs and local town fairs and all that stuff, and just little dive bars. And I think it just kind of spread out, and I just really learned to enjoy it and playing around that area. In 2019, I moved to Nashville, and that was a big like pivot for myself. I was probably like in my mid-20s at that point, and I no degree, and I really enjoyed the path I was on, but I thought if I was ever going to like take music seriously or consider any other path in life, it was kind of the moment. And I learned I wanted to move to Nashville and learn more about the music industry at that point. I was playing out, and I kind of had a sense that this was something I really wanted to do. So I moved there, and I learned if you became a resident of Tennessee, you could get free in-state tuition for 2 years. And so I was in school entirely online, which was an awful idea for me. And I was playing drums pretty quickly for different country bands in and around Nashville. And I was interning at a publishing house in Nashville that was focusing on music licensing. So understanding the back end of it. So that was like my mornings were there, and then in school in the afternoon, and then writing songs downtown, and then playing drums till 2 a.m. at some late night bar and starting all over again. So 2019 was a pretty crazy year for me. But like, I totally immersed myself in the music that year and moved to Nashville and fell in love with it. I thought it was, in hindsight, probably a really good time to be there. A lot of emerging artists were either moving there or just starting to make a name for themselves there that I was able to meet and build great connections with. And so that changed a lot for me. And then COVID happened after that. So, and it's crazy to sit here and act like we're talking about some time, long time ago. But I mean, that was 2019 was a few years ago by now.
Yeah,
so.
It's wild. It doesn't seem like it, but yeah, that's a long, I mean, my daughter was like basically an infant at that point, which is crazy.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And so then COVID happened and I moved back out to Montana and got more into playing and back into worked on as a ranch hand on a place there and bounced around. And it's funny, like I tried really hard to make the music thing happen in 2019. And I think I was still learning a lot, and like anything, it takes time. But by the end of 2019, I was a bit dismayed about the whole thing. I worked an internship at a publishing house and I was totally demystified about like Music Row and the whole industry really. And I was like, this is ridiculous. I'm over this. I was much happier out West. And so I like recorded a record on my way out the door. And then I went back out to Montana, and like, it's funny that like moving back out West was like the best thing I feel like I did for my music, I guess. Like getting some distance between myself and the industry was nice. And, played more music out West. And once like, COVID kind of let up and then I kind of started spending a bit of time in the winters going back out to the Southeast and staying in Nashville and recording and, cutting my teeth there and playing in Texas. And now I've kind of like devised this, I kind of split up my time each year between the South and the West at the moment. And it's been enjoyable. I've enjoyed it. We're still like, I'm here in Nashville today and we're finishing up my full length record at the moment. And it's been great to utilize this place for music and to be able to have a reprieve from it. And then to be able to kind of step back into Montana and like, I guess I've enjoyed having several passions at one time, and it's helped me from not burning myself out from one or the other. And I think they fuel each other in a way, which has been great. And now obviously as music has taken over more of my time, it's a challenge now to figure out how I can adequately pursue both of them at the same time, which is kind of a newer thing for me. But I will say in the early stages of my music career, I've enjoyed being able to step away from it. And yeah, so that's where I am now.
I love that. I'd love to hear more about kind of some of your takeaways from being inside of like the music business there and like ground zero of country music, corporation, the mega corporation that is the country music industry. Because it seems like I want to talk about like the things you're doing with Western Landowners Alliance. And it seems like a lot of the ways you're going about doing things on the surface, if you were to ask like, a music MBA kind of person there, a number cruncher in Nashville, they would say that you're doing things the exact opposite of how they do things, which I love. I mean, I think that's really, really cool. But like, what did you see when you're inside that music that was either instructive to you or you decided like, yeah, I'm not going to be able to do it that way?
Yeah. I think like, well, first of all, a lot of people think of Nashville from outside of it and they kind of have this like disdain for it, and rightfully so. Like the industry can be kind of disheartening. And there's a lot of commercial elements to Nashville, but the thing that I've grown to love about Nashville is the like potency of creativity going on here. You have like all of the session musicians, like the best pedal steel players and fiddle players and everything. They're here, cutting records 9 to 5 Monday through Friday and playing in the clubs every night. And like you have great songwriters here, and it's like a place that you don't necessarily have to spend your whole time here, but as a creator in this space, as a musician or a songwriter, like it's absolutely a place you need to come. It's like you're not doing yourself you're doing yourself a disservice by like staying away from it, because it's just a watering hole. I mean, you can look at it that way. It's a central location where a lot of folks meet. And with that, though, I will say like the industry was disheartening in a way. Like when I came here and fell into this, online schooling, and then from that was eligible to get an internship, and I walked into the door of like I got my internship, and this is a really funny story. I hope they're not listening, but when I was playing on Broadway, I like stumbled into like literally 2 weeks into living in Nashville, at like 3 a.m, I was out singing at a karaoke bar with some new friends I had just made. And someone like took a video of me and put it on their story or their Snapchat or something. And the promoter of a bigger venue down on Broadway was like, "Who's that dude?" And the lady's like, "I don't know. Let me find out." And she asked my name and stuff. And through that lady, he asked if I could, cover a gig Friday night, 10 o'clock, 3-hour gig on Broadway. So that's how I got my first gig on Broadway.
That's cool.
Yeah, I didn't even have 3 hours of material. I was like, no. And so I luckily put together a good band and we got through it. But so I was doing this residency down there on Broadway, and I heard there was like a industry meeting or something above one of the venues. And the reason I wanted to go is because I heard there was free food. So me and my friend rolled up, and we were there for the free food, and I'm wearing my cowboy hat and just kind of my gear and all that, and just what I'd be wearing wherever I was, kind of like my regular getup. And I kid you not, like these group of executives that were in there, they're like, are you making a statement by wearing this? Are you trying to make fun of Nashville for being like, what is this supposed to be? And I was taken aback. I was like, this is just what I wear. Like, I don't know. I don't have an answer for you. I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I just got off playing a show, and this is what I wear to the grocery store. And they're like, you got to come and meet our boss. He's going to get a kick out of you. And so I met these folks, and that's how I got my internship. It wasn't through school. It wasn't through anything. I was like, that's how I got it. And they gave me like kind of helped me with my music and all that too. And anyways, I just like learned about the industry through a lot of these folks, and learned like in these production houses are folks that got a degree. Maybe they're from some school from far away, and they moved to Nashville to work in this publishing house, but they don't really have a reverence for the history of the music. They don't really have a deep understanding of it, nor do they really care about country music. It's just a job. And it was very corporate in that setting. Like I walked in and everybody's wearing Adidas and skateboard shoes and stuff. And like, it's fine. It just really showed that there was a disconnect between the music that was supposed to be for people of the country and the people that were in charge of like pulling the levers. And that was like really disheartening for me to see that like they were just in it for the money. That's all it was. And so I learned that pretty quick. I hope that's not that's a very long-winded answer to your question there, but
no, I think that's a great answer. And I think it's important to know that stuff. Like, even though it is disheartening and everything, it's reality. And I think if you take out the artistry of what you're doing and just think about it as a business, it's a very, very tough business. And so like having some knowledge about the realities of how these things work, I think I don't care what form of art you're in. Like my friends, Bo Alexander and Logan Maxwell Ajej, they're artists out in California, and they started their own gallery because they're all about the art. They're all about supporting the artist. And they looked around and said, well, we don't like the way the normal galleries work, so we're going to do it our own way. And I think without that base knowledge of the reality of the business, it's really hard to focus in on it, and to make clear decisions and be successful outside of the system. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And to be clear, I also gained a lot of like great insight and helpful insight to the industry. So I don't think it's all a wash, but I did I did see that like that soulless commercial element of Nashville. I definitely saw it prevalent in certain ways. And I guess I learned like, so I ended up like writing music while I was in that internship, like, and writing songs as a songwriter, not as an artist. And a lot of the stuff I'd like present to them too, because they were interested in my music. They were like, this is great, but it's novel. Like there's no way we can make money off this. We can't pitch this to whoever the big country artists are. Like we can't pitch it. And I learned like, okay, if I'm going to make music, I have to be the front of the music. I have to be it's like too, I guess, intimate for that that kind of infrastructure. So that's kind of why I became an artist. Like, it was really just as I was a songwriter, and so I started putting out my own music. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot that I learned, good things that I learned about being there, a lot of things I learned I didn't want to do, and a lot of the things I'm doing today are probably the exact opposite of what they would probably recommend I do. I mean, I haven't ever put out a full-length record, and this last record last little 3-song EP that I did is entirely donated my time and money to producing a little project to share Western landowners' lines and kind of share my love for conservation. And I'm sure that's probably not a good financial decision from a manager's standpoint or anything like that.
Well, yeah, the Excel spreadsheet jockeys might tell you that, but I think it's the best. I mean, I think it's awesome. And I mean, I think it's the right thing to do. Can you talk more about that? Because I'd love to. How did you first initially interact or come to know about Western Landowners Alliance?
Yeah, they had been on my radar for a little bit, and I think I had this idea of like a record of really kind of honing in on just doing some more like real like cowboy songs or Western oriented songs. And I've sing a lot of them, play a lot of them, and I want to do more of a conceptual record that like focused on just that element and like playing with gut string, banjo, and harmonica and instruments you actually would have seen on the trail, like back in the late 1800s when the cowboys were coming up from Texas and like that whole era. And it just, something didn't sit right with me with like making this record and like kind of just wearing the hat and being the face of this like cowboy centric record or Western centric record. And I've tried to find a way to like make sense of that. And I think finding a way to contribute to a lot of the things that ranchers face today, that people face in cowboy culture today, was probably an adequate way to like give back while making art. I'm not like an authority on ranching or a gatekeeper of any sort. So I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't appropriating anything, that I was contributing to it in a positive way. And I think with this like renewed interest in Western culture through TV shows and media these days, like, how can I do my part to leverage that influence towards a better cause? And so that's really what this record was. So through our mutual friend, Cole Mannix, I had asked him, I know he had done a lot of work with a lot of different folks. And in a conversation, I was like, who do you know that's doing good stuff? And he gave me a short list, and Western Landowners Alliance was on it, and I got to meet them. And yeah, I was happy to work with them. I like that they're a West-wide group, which kind of I thought made sense because, a lot of people hear about whether it's like maybe a land trust company or a conservation group or something that's localized or something like that. I think if people can realize there's people out there helping with resources across the West, that just seem more universal. And maybe someone's in New Mexico or Texas and they can say, hey, you know what? Actually, these guys helped me down here as well. So I like that.
Yeah, they're a great organization. I think Leslie Allison, who is the executive director or CEO, is one of the smartest people I've ever met. And I really, I think the public lands groups, the public lands advocacy groups like Backcountry Hunters, Anglers, they've done such a great job with marketing and telling the story of the importance of public lands. And for the longest time, I felt like there was a gap where nobody was really telling the story of private land and how private land benefits entire ecosystems, and it's kind of a foundational part of ecosystems, particularly in the West. And I feel like Western Landowners has figured out a way to fill that gap, both with, partnering with people like you, and then with their magazine and their podcast and storytelling. I mean, films, they're really doing measurably great work across this whole massive landscape. Oh, talk about the album cover. I guess you'd call it an album cover because a past podcast guest made it for you, right?
Yeah, I just saw that you did an episode with him. I can't wait to hear it. My buddy Jess Mudgett made that artwork. He donated the artwork for the record, which was really, really nice of him because his time is very valuable. So I really appreciate that. Yeah, glad to have worked with him on that. And
he's super cool.
Oh man, he's awesome. He's great, and hope we can meet up again this summer as well. But actually, I'm going to see him in Iceland. I'm playing in Iceland in a couple weeks here, 2 weeks, and so he's going to be out there the same time. So we'll reconvene there.
Is he going over there with Chris Burkhardt?
I don't know what he's doing. That guy is always traveling all sorts. I think it's his birthday, actually, the day that I'm playing in Reykjavik. He's going to be there. And so we're going to hang out there. And I'm getting ready to head to Texas for South by Southwest, and then Iceland, England, Ireland. But yeah, he'll be in Iceland while we're there. So
he's a great dude. Tell him I said hello. But wait, talk about this European tour. That's wild. How'd that come about?
Well, I love roots music of all sorts, and I've kind of spent a lot of time in certain parts of the Northwest and Texas and Tennessee, and I really wanted to expand my horizons and go to places where that I just kind of feel called to go. And I had the opportunity to go to England. A group had reached out, and I love Irish music and a lot of European music as well. And I kind of added on to the run. We booked some other stuff just so we could spend time in some of those musical pockets. Iceland happened. My band leader and actual producer of my full-length record as well, Thor Davidson. He's from Iceland. He's a harmonica player and multi-instrumentalist. He plays in a rock group called Kaleo as well. If you're familiar with the rock world, they're a pretty big rock group out of Iceland. So he hooked up a few shows there so we could spend time there. His father was a horse trainer in Iceland, so we're going to spend time with some horses out there and just spend time playing music. But yeah, like I said before, I love traveling and I love using like my love for agriculture and music to give me a focus for traveling. So wherever I go, I kind of seek those two things out: horsemanship or stockmanship and music. Wherever I go, I want to find those things. So.
And let's talk about Old Salt, because that's going to be happening sooner than, I mean, it's not that far out really at this point. And you're playing a pretty big role in that, kind of the behind the scenes part of that. Let's talk about that, because people, seriously, man, last year when I went to that thing, I mean, obviously I thought it would be fun or else I wouldn't have wanted to do it. But yeah, it was really one of the most special events I've ever attended. I mean, just the people, the music and all the events and the entertainment was great. But I think what made it for me was the people. Like every person I met there was just amazing, and I just loved it. So talk about your role in that this year.
Yeah, I feel the same way about Old Salt. I bet some of my friends that weren't there are sick of me telling them how great it was, and so I hope they decide to join us this next year. And yeah, we met there, and I almost forgot you mentioned I had like a messed up arm. I had just gotten out of surgery, like maybe 2 weeks, if that, before I played last year. I had a ranch accident and broke my elbow, and pretty bad, like maybe concussion and a few other things. But I had that big long mechanic brace on. They had me.
I remember it.
Like keep my range of motion going. So I was just off the surgery table when we were playing that show. In fact, our set list, I didn't have any paper at the house, and I just had these 5 X-rays they took of my elbow, and so I wrote the set list on the back of those X-rays. And so, yeah, but that was a great, it was an amazing event. I'm so glad to be a part of it more this year. The Mannix family, all of them have become good friends just being in that part of the country. And they asked me to help curate some of the talent and to just help a bit with the operations. And I'm glad to be a part of it this year. I feel the same way. I felt absolutely moved by it. I played a lot of different festivals and events, but Old Salt was like nourishing going there. Like it was great to have a reason to celebrate, a reason to be playing music, and a reason to be getting together. It was just beautiful to see people from all different walks of life focusing on the common love for land and local agriculture. And it's just such a beautiful event. And I hope that it inspires, more people to come and talk about land and holistic agriculture and our role in this as humans. And whether you're a rancher from rural Wyoming or you're, some liberal arts student from the city, it doesn't matter. Like you have a place there. And that was what was really cool, is to see folks like yourself and Leslie and, different soil biologists and folks that work for the Nature Conservancy or the Blackfoot Challenge. And everybody's there talking about their love for land, but through their own language and through using their own expression to do that. And I felt like I really had a part in that conversation for the first time as a musician. And that really kind of helped me think about this record release that I just put out here and my role as a musician. And I say that because I think, I'm glad that I can use my platform to shed some light on conservation, but I really hope that if other artists do the same, like I hope this is a call to action to other artists to find a way to get involved. Like maybe I can, maybe if anything, I can share like a pathway to do that. And I think we owe it, especially as like someone based in Western music or country music, to talk about these topics that are so important. So Old Salt does a great job of that as well, though, of bringing those artists together, the ranchers, the scientists, and the hippies and the cowboys. It's great. It's a lot of fun. It's my type of place.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it, because it's people from it. There's no like single type of person there. It's just this wide range of people that on the surface, like if you were to write down resumes or whatever, you might wonder what some of these folks have in common, but there's just this commonality that allows you to have conversations with anybody you meet there, which is my favorite thing to do. And then I think probably, I talk about this too much, but I really do think that 3 days unplugged from the internet where there's no cell service, I think that does good things to your brain, I think.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. There's definitely a lot of evidence to suggest that, but I just love that the commonality is land, man. Like, you're there on the Mannix historic family ranch. It's just beautiful country. Some of the most like gorgeous ranch country you could imagine. And I've always felt like it's been a hidden secret for a lot of folks. You're at the not too far from the foothills of the Bob Marshall, and I'm just surprised like more people don't, I guess, know about that part of Montana. And it is kind of like the melting pot of a lot of different places in Montana. If you're not far from Missoula, not far from Helena, you've got the mountains, but you've got a lot of open kind of prairie there as well. And you've got this mix of private and public land and this really symbiotic relationship that they both play with each other there. It's like a petri dish, if you ask me, for how the West could operate, all in that one little area there. It's super beautiful.
I'd only been through there maybe once or twice a long, long time ago, because I remember I was driving through Lincoln and I realized that was Unabomber, Unabomber country. And then, but I was so taken away by everything about it. And do you think you're going to kind of end up at, whenever you do decide to settle down a bit, do you think that particular area might be a spot for you?
Yeah, I've been loosely based out of Ovando for a few years now, and that's kind of the town next to Helmville. I would say Helmville is like the sprawling metropolis of Ovando, because Ovando is 69 and Helmville is 28 people. But yeah, I mean, I've been blessed to be an outsider that's like wiggled my way in there over the past, I guess shy of a decade now. But I just love the people there, the type of people it attracts, the locals that have been there for a long time. And I would be blessed to be able to stay there. It's obviously hard with those communities because there's a lot of conservation, there's not so much housing out there, but I'd be lucky to call it home for the rest of my life if I could.
Yeah, it's super, super cool. It's kind of a strange question, but you strike me as just being very authentically yourself, and being, very confident in yourself, not like confident, like arrogant or anything, but just like, this is who I am and this is how I'm going to go about doing things. And it may be a little bit different than the norm, but this is me. And I feel like that's, in my experience, and like the artists that I like, whether it's musicians or authors or poets, whatever, they've all kind of got that where they're comfortable in their own skin. And I feel like, when you think about, as you inject business into things, there's this kind of desire to make things all the same, or you got to conform to a certain way of doing things. And it's easier to make money if you conform, at least in the short term, and all this kind of stuff. Like what advice would you give to aspiring artists or artists early in their career about kind of having confidence in yourself and confidence in doing it your own way, and the kind of grind or the process that's involved in finding your own voice, for lack of a better term? Does that make sense? Does that question make sense?
Yeah. You have to follow where your passion lies. So whether that's maybe being an artist or being in any career field you choose. And I don't know if I'm really am in a position to give much advice, because I feel very green and early on in my career. But if I had any to give, anything that I've kind of realized in my short 28 years of being here is that like we have a natural inclination to we love what we love. We have our passions lie where they lie, and we can do very little to shift that sometimes. And as an artist, it's been something I've struggled with for a long time because art and music is not an easy path to go down. And it was very obvious for me that music was my largest passion. But it comes with a challenging life. And there were times early on where I resented that fact of myself, that like, this is what I love. This is where my intellect lies. This is where what I do. And I wanted it to be anything other than a musician. I envied people that could go ahead and be an accountant because it came with stability and security. And I had none of that, early on. But I learned like, you can't force that. You're best off following your passions and being honest with the things that you love to do. And like, that's the first step. And then just doing everything you can to tackle that, to achieve goals in that arena, like you would with any other career. I look at when I realized I wanted to do music, it was like a switch went on. It was like, okay, now what are the actionable steps I can take towards becoming a successful musician? And when it was being a horseman or a rancher, a switch went on, and I thought the same thing. Like, what do I have to do? I have to get more experience. I need to work my way up the chain, I guess. And I would just say to any like musician or creative, like whether that's like, if that's the route you've go down, like follow where your heart lies with the music, and don't be swayed by whatever trends or whatever's popular at the time. Just like find your own inspiration and diversify that well of inspiration. So that way you are this beautiful amalgamation of all the other musicians and artists that have come before you. I mean, that's where your uniqueness lies, and just like follow that. Like I love Western music. I also love bluegrass and roots music and Celtic music. And this full length record by no means is like a die in the wool country or Western record. There's a lot of like different elements of folk and, Irish banjo and Ozark fiddle and, Dixieland piano and jazz. And there's like a lot of different stuff in it as well. And so just like, yeah, go where your heart takes you to go with the music and don't think twice about it. That's just like your best thing you could do to be successful as a musician.
Yeah, I love that. When I interviewed Nick Offerman, the woodworker, actor, writer, he does everything, but we were talking after the fact, and I was telling him like, man, I just get so nervous before these things, and I feel like I sound like a dumbass. And he's like, the imperfections are what make things interesting. Yeah. And he's friends with like Jeff Tweedy, the musician, and he's friends with all these artists. And he said the reason that their art is interesting and is unique and people like it is because it is imperfect. And we're all just kind of bumbling. And if you get to perfect, that's boring. And computers can make perfect, like the imperfection is, and the weirdness and the uniqueness that we all bring is exactly what is the appealing part. That's what I really admire about the way you do things is it's you. And there's nobody can replicate that, even down to donating the proceeds to a conservation organization. I've never heard of, I'm sure somebody's done some version of that, but I've never heard of it. It's you. But it does take confidence. It requires a level of vulnerability that is extremely uncomfortable unless you're like a raging narcissist that thinks you're the best thing in the world. It's weird to put yourself out there.
Yeah, I can understand that. I can understand Nick's point too. I'm a big fan of Willie Nelson. Like he's probably my guidebook if I had to have one on music, like how to have a successful life for that matter. Willie Nelson, man. Like I read his book, his autobiography recently. It's so inspiring because like he just took so many like left turns in life, and that's why he is who he is. Like there's no other explainable way than he just did a lot of different stuff and he ended up with who he is today. Those imperfections are like authentic. I can totally agree with that. We just cut this full length record in Nashville, and you'd think we'd be in some big fancy studio, but we recorded it in a place called the Bomb Shelter, which is quite literally a home in East Nashville that's been there as a recording studio for a few decades now, and just recently started like a lot of like younger emerging Americana artists have been recording there. But it's like this like totally wonky setup. They've got all this like old direct to tape, production machinery. So the whole record's like done to tape, and you can like hear the room, if that makes sense. Like you can hear the wonkiness of the room, and the whole band, it's not in some big studio isolated in different rooms and to a click track. Like we did it all with just really good musicians that understood the assignment, and we, went into one room and didn't overthink it and kind of put it down on paper. And like, it's just more believable in that way. And I think that, like, to Nick's point, those little blemishes or it makes it relatable and real. And we shouldn't stray away from that. It's like it's not an effort worth taking to, like, you risk being sterile in that. Oh, regard.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I can agree.
I really admire the way you go about doing everything. 2 more questions for you. I'm always looking for book recommendations, and I'm wondering if there are any books you've read, and they don't have to be about the West. They can really just be about anything, but books that have been important in your development as a human.
Well, I can kind of name drop a buddy of mine that I think in a way has been inspiring. It's a more recent book, and he's also a really good friend of mine. J.B. Zelke released his own memoir. It's called The Lost Cowboy, and he's a really good buddy of mine I've met through my time in the West out of Saratoga, Wyoming. From there, and he's been on 6 of the 7 continents, and I could really identify with his journey, working on different ranches and working horses and cattle, like all over the entire world. And when I met him, I was rolling around Gillette, Wyoming at the Daly Ranch at that time, and he rolled down in his little Oldsmobile or whatever he was driving, and he rolled up in his Crocs and his dusty pearl snap, and I was like, I like this dude. And he'd been traveling all over the world, from Mongolia and riding reindeers there, and to working on outfits in Mexico and all over Europe, and just like crazy stuff. And he was able to capture it on his camera and in his book. But it inspired me because he's a few years older than me, but we're about the same age. And his like brazen, like total disregard for the way you're supposed to live life, and like living life by your own terms. And it was inspiring. He now runs a YouTube channel called The Dusty Vaquero, and he showcases working cowboys and musicians that are like in the ag space or related to it. And so that's where I had met him. He stumbled on the Daly Ranch there, which is owned by Kellen Smith, who's another musician. And we both were working, and he came and took videos of us, and I couldn't believe this dude's story. And so I think we've been inseparable kind of ever since. I run into him all over the place. So I'd say his book and his story has been very inspiring to me. Oh, and Willie's autobiography that I mentioned recently. It's a long story.
Oh yeah.
It's a great one.
I need to read that. I'd love to read that. Is it really good?
It's good. It's a good audio book. He talks a lot about his whole case with the IRS, but as a musician, I really enjoyed the part about like he took all these. He lived in like Seattle, I believe, and he lived in like all over the Northwest and different areas, and I had no clue that he was talking about being in his late 20s with a kid and a wife and trying to have a successful career as a radio DJ, and it's like stuff you just don't hear about, Willie, and it really humanizes the success story of someone like him, and that was very healthy, I think, and very helpful for myself to hear recently. So, last
question for you is the people that listen to this podcast, I think they get a lot of instruction and kind of inspiration from people, even if they people that have no desire or any kind of idea about being a professional musician. They can take a lot of this wisdom that you've shared and apply it to whatever they're doing in their life. And so you've already supplied a ton of wisdom, but any kind of parting words to wrap this thing up?
Yeah, man, just follow, I guess, like I said before, follow your passions in life and wherever they lie, and find a way to kind of intertwine them. And I guess if I had any wisdom at all, that might be it. I feel like that's safe to say.
Well, man, I really, really enjoyed this. I'm glad we finally made it happen. Have fun over there on the other side of the ocean. And then I'm going to look forward to hanging out with you in person in June in Montana. But I seriously, man, I know you got a lot going on, and I thank you so much for taking the time.
Oh, thank you, Ed. Thank you. Yeah, I'll see you June 21st through the 23rd at Old Salt Fest. Can't wait to be there.
Hey, it's Ed again. Thanks so much for listening to the podcast. I know your time is valuable, so it means the world that you spend it listening. If you want to support the podcast and help it to continue to spread and grow, There are a few ways you can help. Number one, pass it along to a friend or share it on social media. Word of mouth recommendations are the most powerful way for ideas to spread, so I'd love it if you could share the podcast with a few pals who might enjoy it. Number two, you can go to Apple Podcasts and give it a 5-star review. Good reviews encourage the Apple overlords to suggest the podcast to others. So there's a link in the notes if you'd be so kind as to give it 5 stars. Number three, you can support the podcast financially via Patreon, and there are exclusive benefits for those who do, including a monthly behind-the-scenes newsletter, Mountain and Prairie stickers, live and recorded video chats with podcast guests, and much more. Number four, I've also got 2 emails that I send out. The first is my weekly email called Good News from the American West, which I send out every Wednesday. It's only positive news, something we can all use a little more of these days. And my other email is my bi-monthly book recommendations email. One email every other month with 5, 6, 7, or 8 books that I've recently read and highly recommend. The thousands of people on both of these lists will vouch for me. No spam or other funny business. And number 5, finally, check out my online store for Mountain and Prairie stickers, shirts, and coffee mugs. I've got some really cool designs from Western artists with more on the way. So head to mountainandprairie.com/shop to check it all out. I'd love to connect with you. I'm on Instagram and LinkedIn, so look me up on either of those platforms by my name or through the links on my website. All right, that's it. Thanks so much for your support.